What's going on, leaders? Aaron Bolton here, and this is Leadership Lockdown. Now, lately we've been discussing the different challenges people may be going through while they're working from home or even unemployed during this quarantine, stay at home, social distancing period. But one thing we haven't talked about is what happens when we all start going back to work? What happens when we all start filing back into the office? Well, that's exactly what this episode is going to be talking about. My guest is Dr. Troy Hall. He's the author of Cohesion Culture, and he's going to be discussing the different challenges leaders are going to be facing when they enter back into the office. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. There's a wealth of knowledge there, and I truly hope that you enjoy it as well. All right, let's get it on.
So you ready to get rolling?
Roll ready to get rolling.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I'll kick it off then. Hello, all you leaders out there. This is Aaron Bolton, and thank you for watching another episode here of Leadership Lockdown. I'm very happy today to be here with our guest. It is Dr. Troy Hall. Dr. Troy Hall, and he is the Chief Strategy Officer for South Carolina Federal Credit Union. He is also a global expert on talent retention. He's a coach, he is a consultant, and he is an author. He's an author of this book just released. See if we can get that on there. There it is, Cohesion Culture. Cohesion Culture. It's available on Amazon. It's available on Kindle, which that's what I'm taking advantage of it right now. Retain your top talent. Sir, how are you today?
Well, I am doing fine, and I would like to say that if I were any better, I'd be you.
Oh, wow. I haven't heard that one. I'm gonna steal that. I'm gonna steal that. I've said in the past, if I was doing any better, I'd be twins. So I'm gonna take that and pass that on. Only I'm gonna say if I was doing any better, I'd be Dr. Troy Hall. And they'd be like, oh, they'd say, I know exactly who that is. I saw that. I saw that podcast. I know.
Yeah, that's great.
So we talked last week, and the more I started thinking about it this weekend, the more excited I got about this conversation today, because you wanted to talk about something very specific that kind of lines up exactly with a roundabout way lines up exactly with what I'm trying to accomplish here with this show. Right now we have challenges. That's really what I want to bring. I want to bring other leaders onto the show, talking about challenges that they're going through right now, but not just challenges. It would be almost wasteful. It'd be a complaint session if we just talked about challenges, but overcoming the challenges, right? What's some advice that we can have? So one of the challenges right now, obviously, is everyone is, or so many people are locked down at home. So many people are out of the office, and that would be a huge challenge to overcome. And when we overcome that challenge, we're in the office, and
Right.
then that brings a lot more challenges. And that's what you brought to me. I remember. I stopped and I kind of looked up to the side, almost like in dead space, like, I hadn't thought about that far. I wonder how many people are thinking that far advanced. They're looking at right now, they're in a very reactive phase, reacting to what's going on. And I think it's very important to have a mindset and a heart of proactivity. So, but
it is. It's really a good thing to really be thinking ahead. So, part of my role also, and you mentioned it as a consultant, is I serve as the lead consultant for our subsidiary. And so I work with, business leaders and organizations literally around the globe, and all kinds of industries. So it's not just in the credit union industry, but certainly in other forms. And in leadership, one of the things that you look at from a strategic standpoint are two things. Number one, you look at any plan, and the first question you ask yourself is, what happens if it goes wrong? So you have to ask yourself, you have to be prepared for it. Well, anyone can put together a plan that works.
Right.
So your question then becomes when does the plan not work? And what does that look like so that you can plan for it? And then the next thing is, it's sort of like what I call your chess mentality. In chess, the best chess players are the ones who think at least 3 moves ahead. and try to interpret what will happen with the game board. If I do this, someone else will do that. So it's like that scenario planning and mapping sort of concept, and then, play it out as it goes. So for me, it was, well, let's look at, well, what's going to happen now. We've gotten through the hunkering down. We've gotten through moving people into remote locations. But what does it look like when your business continuity plan says that you can now resume your normal operations? And that's what is our topic for today.
Absolutely. And before we get into that, if you could give the audience here a little background on yourself, a little bit of your narrative, if you would.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. So from a professional standpoint, I'm the Chief Strategy Officer of South Carolina Federal Credit Union, as you mentioned that. I've been in the credit union industry for about 25 years, been some influence, whether I was a consultant working with the industry or actually in the industry itself. I've worked for 43 years in sales and marketing, but do not let the hair color fool you in any of that.
Right.
So, and then with that, also, I talked about the consulting role that I've done with the, through our subsidiary. And I have a PhD in global leadership and entrepreneurship, and my dissertation was in group dynamics with a specific study in cohesion. And so taking that information and pulling it together as we launched the consulting side of our business, we launched the book that you referenced in the beginning of the podcast, Cohesion Culture, Proven Principles to Retain Your Top Talent.
And I think it's if I'm not mistaken, is that the book right there in the background?
Oh,
yeah.
Well,
Oh, this
amazing.
this
we have the book in the back. Anyone who's paying it, when you release the visuals of this podcast, for those of you who were just listening only, I have positioned a copy of the book in the visuals like any good marketing person would. Okay, so selfless promotion. Okay, I get it. That's what I was doing.
Right.
I make
It's okay.
no apology. Okay.
No, not at all. Well,
Yeah.
It's actually very strategic, and you being the chief strategic officer, it makes sense. You very strategically set that up.
Yeah, so you have to live out what you say you're going to do, right? That's a success of leadership. Is I often say that the success of a leader is the difference between what the leader says and what the leader does. And when the difference between the two are spot on, then you have an effective leader, regardless of what industry or what the task is or what they're doing. So it's important. And it's effective because we always speak in leadership, and I want to clarify this. Leadership is always from a positive perspective. It's not from a negative. So when I say effective leadership, I'm not talking about leadership that's poor or destructive. I'm talking about one that's fruitful, that's producing results. So when I say leader says, leader does, I'm talking about the positive, good things that the leader is doing, not just the leader saying, hey, I'm just going to go over here and reduce my work staff, and so then I go do, and then you go like, yeah, that's an effective leader. No, that's not what we're talking about here.
Right. So on that, just wondering, when you're speaking with others about leadership, maybe giving a talk, or maybe in a class setting, however it is, and you mention good leaders, or you mention leadership, strong leadership, has anyone ever given an example of somebody? I'll tell you, I've had it before where I talk about leaders, and I've had it, and it's almost a comedy cliche at this point, but it's not, where they say, well, Hitler. I'm like, no, okay, he led people to doom, he led people to misery. Do you ever have anyone come up with anything like that, or say anything off the wall like that?
No, not really.
It's just my clientele. Don't worry.
Yeah, in the workshop. So I have a workshop. It's a culture and leadership workshop, and so part of the aspect is to understand that the effective leader. And by the way, I want to clarify something first. I don't say good leader. I say effective leader.
Effective. Yep.
And actually, we've changed that sort of terminology, not when we were raising our children, but when we're involved with our grandchildren. And we talk about being an effective leader. So we actually talk to them about leadership, and not necessarily about being good or bad, because I think it becomes nebulous sometimes, the good or the bad, and the interpretation of values. But if you can hone in on the exact value that you want them to be, you want them to be effective in the choices they make. Someone may think that choice is not the best choice, but it doesn't make it a bad choice. And so the difference between good and bad is important, but effective leaders. So in the discussion in this workshop, it's a culture and leadership workshop. And one of the exercises is to look at transformative leaders. And so I go through 4 characteristics of a transformative leader. And through that process, I ask them, think about a person that you have interacted with. And the real great examples that you'll have in leadership are the ones that have touched your life.
Mhm.
Not the ones that you see from a distance, not the political figures, the sports figures, the historical folks. I mean, it's good to learn from them, right?
Right.
But I mean, I might admire Benjamin Franklin, but guess what? I could not tell whether or not he is truly a transformative leader or not because I didn't have personal interaction with him. I have hearsay.
Right.
I'm dealing with stuff that's been documented and said by someone else. So in your choice of which leaders do you want to follow, I would suggest that you create a model of value for yourself based on someone that you've actually interacted with so that you can see it for firsthand.
Absolutely. One thing I in workshops as well, I ask, often the question, well, maybe during an icebreaker or some type of activity, kind of early on, or I'll ask, for uh, maybe people get into pairs, get into groups, either way, come up with and share a leader who's affected you in your life positively.
Yeah.
And I can't think of, I never hear Mahatma Gandhi. Not saying that he wasn't an effective leader, but I always hear something like my aunt, a pastor, a youth pastor of mine, something like that, somebody. So in my experience anyways, people resonate with leadership being something close to them when you're asking that. It's not
Sure.
it's an evolution from when we were younger and who your role models. Oh, this football player, this actor. And now, as we get older, that connection, we start seeing it closer to us and who we want to emulate.
Yes, exactly.
Very good. So you tell me, which one do you want to kind of talk about more first? Do you want to go more into your book? Do you want to go more into the returning back to the office space? Which one leads
Well,
easier from one
let's
to the
kind
other?
of we're going to combine them because
Let's do
we'll
it.
just start out with an idea behind the cohesion culture and what is cohesion, why is it important, and then relate the elements of cohesion to the concept. So I've made some notes, for that. So maybe looking down from time to time is just to remind me of some of the things that I thought were important.
You're just
But when
being
it comes
effective.
to
You're being
oh,
effective.
yeah,
That's what's important.
it's being spot on. I want to make sure this podcast is effective for people listening to it.
Absolutely.
So cohesion deals with with creating an environment where people have a sense of belonging, where they have value, and they exhibit mutual commitment. And when you have that, then you have individuals operating on a cohesive level. Now, why cohesion is so important is because cohesion is a causal phenomenon, which means that when cohesion is present within a group or a team, it means that you will get performance. And one of the things that I caution individuals about is this elusive term engagement. I sometimes refer to it as the engagement lullaby, that we
Mhm.
have sort of been lulled to sleep to believe that we can see an engaged employee. We can assess from certain actions and activities and we go, aha, we found ourselves the engaged employee.
Right.
But the reality is that the engaged employee, the engagement aspect, is a byproduct of performance that comes with cohesion. So the difference between causal and something called correlational is that when it's causal, it produces it. So cohesion produces performance. So I can give you an example of rainy days and umbrellas. And people will correlate rainy days and umbrellas. And if you were going to base your decision on the fact that with every rainy day, then all umbrellas open, or on rainy days, umbrellas open, and then you state that like it's a factual piece, that's not really true. And
Right.
it's not true because on rainy days, I cannot open an umbrella because I could just wear a slicker. I could go out without anything. On even sunny days, people raise umbrellas.
Right.
So the reality is that raising it and closing of the umbrella is not a controlled outcome based on whether it was rainy or not. But when you have belonging, value, and mutual commitment, you have cohesion. And when you have cohesion, you have performance. When you have performance, you get the type of engagement that you're looking for. So in that whole conversation too of this, why you want to put this in place is because you're working on mutual goals. You're working on things that should be a result of people working together. That is the value of transformative leadership that really embodies the type of leader that can really perform well in that type of culture or that type of environment. So that's really the essence of what cohesion culture is. And why it's important is because 63% of all employees are actually looking for advancement. Now, when there's a situation such as a pandemic or a disruption in continuity, those individuals may not necessarily be looking, but as soon as things return back to normal, the data suggests that individuals will continue that habit. Why? Because we like to evolve. We want to evolve to a future. We want to evolve to something else. So looking to better ourselves or looking to better the situation, I mean, that's not an uncommon thought or uncommon practice. So even if you didn't have data behind yourself, you could reasonably listen to that and go, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. So the opportunity for organizations is to create a cohesion culture so that their individual employees will not think of looking outside the organization, but will look for development opportunities within. And then it requires the HR area to have strategies and practices in place that actually allow for that opportunity for the development and the growth of the individual, so the individual is not forced outside of the organization. And the reason that I use the phrase top talent is this. If you as an organization have spent money to acquire an individual to be a part of your group and a part of your team, why wouldn't they be top talent? Why wouldn't you give everyone the opportunity to be the top talent? And if you invest and spend time with them as you did to recruit them into retaining them, you may have less people that you may be unhappy with in the long run, because not only did you do a good vetting process in the beginning because you aligned what you were doing for acquiring with the values and the culture of the organization, but then you support the individual in the culture and the organization when they get here. And they also want to be retained as well as you want to retain them. So that's the nature of the book. And so again, those values or those elements of cohesion are belonging, value, and mutual commitment. And let's just stop for a second there. You asked me a few more questions if you want to clarify, and then we'll move into how those three elements are going to assist you or assist the leader in actually creating a transitional work environment.
Oh yeah. So one thing you mentioned, the way that you talk about cohesion is very similar to a lot of times how I think of leadership, in the way that the way how people describe it, well, not necessarily cohesion, but the engagement, right? They're looking for engagement. The business owners or the managers of the whatever XYZ company, they want that engagement on their team. And it reminds me of speaking with different managers, different leaders saying, or leaders in companies saying, we want leadership development in the company. Absolutely. I think that's great. I go through needs analysis, start asking questions, but then they start saying what they really want. They're not looking at any foundational things. They're looking at like the end result. I want people to take up a charge like this, or have this type of, execution, or this type of mindset. Okay, but let's go all the way back over to the very beginning. Who are we working with? There's all these other foundational things that need to be addressed first before I can't just drop them in a class and have me talk at them or even with them. It could be a great workshop, but if it only addresses like the end goal in mind, it's not really, it's going to be short-lived, the whatever results.
It is. And so in cohesion culture, it's a framework. So it's not that every organization is going to be exactly the same. You'll do whatever your activities are that are reflective of your culture. Your culture is a combination of traditions, rituals, language, images, norms, standards. Those are the types of things. And values, like the core values of the organization, or the ethics that the organization operates under. I mean, that creates a foundation, and it creates a framework. And it also has to permeate throughout the organization. You have done training. I did sales training back when I first started, early 70s, late 70s and 80s. And the one thing that I will tell you is that training is not a pill.
Mm-hmm.
And people try to assume that training is a pill. Like,
Right.
let's just take this person and put them into training, and then they're going to come back and they're going to be great. And
They're
it's like,
done.
yeah, no, the problem is that the leadership is what makes a cohesion culture.
Mhm.
You have HR strategies and practices that create a foundation. So in the book, in the third chapter of the book, I provide what is called a talent retention model. And it is one to help an organization say, what would I need to have in place structurally? And to be able to see it from an image and a viewpoint would then allow that organization to go, oh, these are all the things that have to work together. Because quite often, sometimes you have individuals coming into a work environment who go to training. Training has all of the standards and all of the best practices and things to do it. You get into the field and people are looking at each other going like, well, did that happen? And the individuals who are then supporting the whole thing are sort of like, yeah, I know that's what they told you, but this is what we do. Yeah, and then
yeah.
it's crazy. So the more that you can get the organization to operate in that particular vein, and if you do it with something grounded, that's why I use cohesion. It's proven. The research, there's tons of research on it, not only as the own personal research I've done, but it's already existing out there. When I worked on cohesion, I didn't create it. I extended the literature, because that's what you do through research is you extend the literature. You keep building another piece of bridge that takes you to someplace else. And if you don't do that, then it's not like you create a gap between where stuff is today and where you think it is tomorrow. No, you build a piece of it so that it keeps building on and on. And that should work like that for an employee. You should be extending the life and the development of the employee all along, but it needs to be congruent with how the organization is going to operate once the individual gets there. So I think those are the types of things. It's the mindset. So in the book, I've actually set up into what I call 3 acts. Act 1 is about be a leader. This is good information for anyone, because one of the primary teaching conversations is you cannot serve the many until you serve the one. That means you, the leader, have got to get your act together before you can think you can be responsible for other people. You also have to be responsible for the single person in any group or team that you're in, because if you think that you're going to manage everyone in their group identity as they come together and form the group and the team, you have totally lost yourself in the conversation. So you have to do that. You also have to see the humanness of the individual. If you don't see the humanness within people, then you don't really understand. You don't have empathy, compassion. You don't have the opportunity to be that type of leader that is really going to connect with people. Because it is not the tasks that get things done, it's people.
Right.
And so the whole effort and energy is toward the people, understanding there will be a task that will happen, but it is about the people. And that's one of the things that makes the cohesion culture part of the mutual commitment really work. So in that leadership, you get the opportunity to know that you're supposed to be investing in someone else. That's transformative leadership. You investing in someone else, not in you, the leader, acting like you're bigger and better and brighter than everyone else, but that you are supporting the dreams and aspirations of those individuals that you're responsible for. I mean, a leader's primary responsibility is to motivate, influence, and enable others to achieve success. That's the first act of the book, the first 2 chapters. And it's good for anyone, whether you're a brand new professional or whether you've been a seasoned professional. It's good reminders. The second act of the book is build the culture. It's to understand what is the underlying values that you want to build into the organization and how do they work. If you want to know why a person believes a particular way, they believe something because it's rooted in a value. And then you have a value which creates a belief, which creates your attitude about the belief and the value. And all of those combine together and manifest themselves into behaviors. And in the second act, what I explain to leaders is, don't take it for granted that people are going to do the right thing. We have enough examples in life to understand that people do not always rise to the occasion. And so it behooves us as leaders to say, these are the types of behaviors that I really want you to focus on. Now, we're using the term behavior here. Do you think I'm going to say in front of an employee, oh, by the way, this is the behavior I really want you to have? It just depends on the sophistication of your organization. You can say, this is how I would like you to interact with others. So you can use other words than behavior. So I just don't want people getting all ripped off on that. And then
Right.
the third part of the book, the third act says, how do you bring it to life? What do I do? So here are some examples, some practical things that you can look at and go, aha, if I do this, I'm really moving myself closer to having a cohesive culture, and an area in which I can then see, aha, this is what needs to happen, and this is where I can tweak something along the way to make it work. And not every organization is horrible when it comes to cohesion, and it's one of the reasons why I do a cultural assessment in any engagement activity with an organization, so that you can get a benchmark as to where you are, and then you can enact your strategies based on how you want to move the needle one way or another. So again, taking a look at the book, the three parts: be a leader, build a culture, bring it to life.
You kind of touched a little bit on this, but I want to see if you can expand upon this just a bit. I'll ask you a question. I know the answer. I know you know the answer. But so on this journey to creating a cohesive culture, right? This cohesion culture, and having this culture on your team. You know, you're having to focus on the individual employee as well. Where in the employee hiring process, where does the focus begin to start building this culture of cohesion?
Well, the culture actually begins first with the HR practices and strategies that are going to be consistent throughout the organization. So I'm not an individual that consults on acquiring individuals or interviewing or getting them. My level of expertise is, once you bring them into the organization, retaining them. Because the retaining aspect is not really HR, it's leadership.
Right.
HR does training, HR does support, HR does all kinds of wonderful things to create and sustain the culture and the well-being, and making sure that people are doing things, but it's the actual interaction of the individual leaders. You don't have the entire HR staff running, throughout the organization, making sure that people feel like they belong, they have value or mutual commitment. That's what leadership does.
Right.
So it begins there. And then if you hire people based on the cultural fit, so this is the advice that I can give you, is when you hire people on cultural fit, you will have a better success in the person integrating within your organization, having some acculturation, some assimilation into the organization, than if you hire for skill only. And what I have found to be, this is experience that has come my way. In an interview process, after you've established skill, you don't need to keep asking anymore about whether they know numbers, they know the systems, they know whatever. You need to start asking them what kind of people they are, because
Yeah.
these are the people you're going to be working with. And quite frankly, I would rather have someone who doesn't have quite all the education, but they have the right spirit. They have the right attitude. They've got the right inside makings that will really gel with the team. And so you look for that. So in the book, I give 7 effective attributes of a leader for a cohesion culture. I would suggest that if you wanted to find people who would fit into a cohesive culture, then those characteristics would be good ones that you could build questions from. But I don't have a list of questions or anything like that I could give out.
Right. Just like the culture is very specific to the company, to the organization, those questions too have to be specific. And by the way, you nailed it. That's exactly the answer. It does start the whole, onboarding or retaining. First you have to bring them on, but you have to have, HR does have to have their stuff lined up. There needs to be those processes, in place. And you mentioned, having the things like building the culture, but having things like the mission statement or the vision, having that defined. It's also very important, I'm sure you'll agree, to have that culture defined as well, have that understanding of what type of culture you want to bring in to your company, not just the idea. What did they say, if it's not written down, it's just a hope. I think it's something like that. But actually having that, not just saying, okay, well, here's our mission statement, here are our values, here's, okay, we got an idea of how our culture should be. Well, do you? You know, it's kind of like you might think something, but the second you say it out loud, you hear it, and you're like, oh, that's maybe not the best way of presenting it. Or, you know, I never thought of it that way. I think of it the same way as writing down, actually getting mapping out almost your culture, so you have a better understanding. And it might not be perfect. That's a very difficult thing to fine tune, is your culture, because I think a lot of leaders can feel it, but it's, you know, trying to actually put it into words. And I'm sure that's what you help with a lot of your workshops, right?
Absolutely. I'm doing a project with an organization, and I asked individuals to define integrity. Like, what does integrity mean to you? And the individuals would say, well, doing the right thing. And so I have to say, well, what is the right thing? How do you know it's the right thing? You see, you have to dig deeper
Mm-hmm.
into the process to really get it. That's why you want to establish the values. And the thing that's interesting for organizational leaders to understand is that people create values based on their experiences and how they make sense of their world. It's called the implication or the attribution theories. And it helps individuals process things that are happening and then how they're going to think about them and relate to them later. I'll take happy birthday as an example. Some people celebrate birthday, right? They celebrate birthday, their day, their week, their month, their year.
It's like,
They're
yeah,
into
slow
it.
it down. Just slow it down. Every
And
day is my birthday, right?
others, they don't necessarily celebrate birthday any differently. They don't want to call it. Maybe they don't want to call attention to themselves or whatever. And sometimes the way people say things. You remember, that's your defense mechanism, because as humans, you realize we are all designed to be right.
Mm-hmm.
We never enter an argument thinking I was wrong. We
Right.
always enter the argument being right. So we're all designed to be right. So in that, so we may have some sort of psychological things that we do to protect ourselves for the survival. But the point to make is that when you had some sort of value that occurred with birthday, something happened
Right.
with happy birthday somewhere along the way, and so that helps you explain or take and make sense of it. And so when someone says, I don't celebrate birthdays, what it is not really they don't celebrate birthday. They don't celebrate the value that the birthday means to them.
Mm-hmm.
So that is, or they celebrate the value that it means to them, which means I'm not celebrating. So it's really interesting. I don't want to get too, theoretical or academic into it, but it is important to just really know that there's complexities that happen. And the more you can articulate what you actually want to say and how you want to define it, the better you have for people to follow along. Again, it's why I did the visual model. The one thing I learned in our PhD is that when you can create or craft a model for people to look at, it helps in the communication and the explanation and the dialogue and the exchange of information and idea, because you take something that's from your head and you move it out into the real world, and you get a chance then to see it. And the important thing to know is that every day, all of our words, all of our language creates the environment in which we live in. So if we are the type of leader who speaks words of affirmation, then we're building people up all the time. And therefore, it's no surprise when people around that type of leader do great things, because they're being supported. It's sort of like, and I don't want to reduce this to rendering children and rearing children, but I want to say it actually works in that particular environment. Because if you speak that your child is stupid, your child is dumb, your child is like, why are you doing that? And then you put some sort of superlative definition around it. The individual, then the child is creating a value based on what your expectation is or how you said it. And that interpretation then lives with them on and on and on. And it's very hard to change values, which is why you should be more careful than ever in the very beginning of a relationship to make sure that you have created a very solid foundation. So remember, the words that we speak create the life that we live in.
Oh, I like that. What is it about people who deal with leadership that they are all about quotes? We were talking about this the other day. I love quotes, and you have your quotes, and I think that's great. I think you're not to jump back onto it too much, but there are, so many similarities between rearing children and developing leaders. There really are. I mean, one thing that I've seen often is, again, managers wanting, or business leaders wanting their employees to go through a leadership development course. and I explain it, what an leadership development course is. It's an evolution. It's a progression. You know, it's not just, we're not going to focus on the company only.
Right.
It's gotta involve all aspects of their life. So I'm really glad the way that you explained, kind of talked about that a bit,
Sure.
because it's not just you can't just, what a lot of times I think people just think of, they take manager training, and then they throw leadership on there. But connecting it with rearing children, I imagine, or it would be, the child does something wrong and you go to discipline them, and whatever it is, you teach them right then, no, you don't do that. That's bad. That's information that they could use immediately. That's the training side of it. That would be like management training, sitting down with the child and saying, let's talk about, why this isn't the best idea, that's more of the development. That would be like the leadership development. And I think that's really important for people to understand, people to know that it is a development. It's not a flip a switch and, all right, I took this class, I'm a leader now.
Right. It's a long-term process that evolves over a period of time. If you think about the way culture works within any country or any ethnic group or whatever, it's developed over time. It's been cemented in activities and repetitive types of ways in which people think about it, and they respond to it that way. So. Well, and this has been, I love this part but I'm really excited about getting to the second part.
Let's do it.
Okay, we ready now?
Let's
Okay,
do
so
it.
here we go. We're continuing part 2, but now we're going to say, how do we take this information? How do we take this cohesion culture, there's elements of that, and how can you apply them to when you have had a business continuity break, and now you're trying to bring individuals back together? So there are some things to think about. The first thing I want to make sure that I mention to you in the realm of engagement, and what you think is that we're going to want employees to be engaged. So we sometimes make assumptions that we can just observe that. And that's not necessarily true, because we observe that an employee comes to work on time, does what they're supposed to do, and they don't bother the boss very much. And we go, wow, that's an engaged employee. Please, I just want another whole big handful of those types of folks. But the reality is that what you've observed is a person coming to work on time, doing their job, and not bothering the boss or asking too many questions. You have no idea whether that person is really engaged or not, because all you've seen are these surface activities. Cohesion gets into the inside, the individual, the intrinsic values behind the individual. And that's really where things operate. In motivation, it's all about the intrinsic aspect, not just extrinsic. Yeah, you can extrinsically motivate individuals to do things because here's your salary structure, here's your title, here's the way the equipment is within the organization. I kind of like the status and the esteem I have. I like the authority and the autonomy, whatever it is that I got within the organization. And those are extrinsically driven for me. What's intrinsic to me is what's more important. It's what those values that the cohesion culture brings forward that will make a difference. So I think that it's important for folks to understand that when they bring either the group back together or they still have the group together one way or another, that they should be focusing on the belonging aspect. And this is where we have the vision and the communications happening. So it's possible that individuals, when they went to remote, got more communication from their company than they did when they were actually physically there.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes we take granted for the physical. So the opportunity here is to understand that people want a sense of belonging. Belonging is a work that was done with Freud and Klein and Bion, and they specifically studied the relationships of the human nature and the human characteristic. And we want to belong. We want to be a part of something. It's why we join groups. It's why we have relationships. It's why we create family units, why we have work units, why we have teams and groups and things like that happen, because we want to cohabitate. So we have to then establish the sense of belonging or reestablish the sense of belonging, and either create a bridge between, hey, people were out there, maybe they were left out, so maybe you had more when they were physical and less when they were out there. You have to evaluate that for yourself. The fact is, whatever which way it is, it doesn't matter. Get it in place. So what you want to do is you want to really focus on those individuals being welcome. So you could throw a welcome celebration party. Well, that's really nice, but that's an extrinsic motivator.
Mm-hmm.
When you do ping pong tables, you do beer pong Friday, you do casual wear your whatever you want to wear program, those are all extrinsic motivators, which are good. You should balance the extrinsic and intrinsic. I don't say you do one or you don't do the other. You balance them, you integrate them so that they make sense with what you do, but you don't just rely on any one of them. Imagine in a coaching environment, imagine the coach of a sports team actually only offered advice from a cheerleading perspective. What you'll find an effective in a coach is a coach will say, hey, great job, Bill. Super job, Susie. Excellent way to do it, Mary. I mean, they'll say those, which are the what I call the cheerleading type of very quick, I'm getting some sort of feedback, right? I'm getting this quick loop of feedback that I need. So that's what it is, right? And it's funny, and you'll notice that the coach never says, okay, I want you to, when you're coaching, so let me back that up. When you're coaching, you're actually providing direction to the individual. Hey, if we do this, let's move this way, because the idea is to score. The idea is to get to the end. The idea is to do whatever the coaching, whatever the mutual agreement that the team has for the goal. And they want that direction and they want the advice so that they will not step on a landmine and actually explode in the process. So in that creating that sense of belonging, what we're doing is we're making sure that people feel that they are part of something big and they are a part of something special. And the best way for that to happen is through communication. And in communication, one of the things that I would suggest is that we do not ask people how they feel in coming back. Better change their emphasis to something like, what have you been doing? Tell me some of the activities that you've been involved in. Tell me something good. We actually have that little saying at work where our boss goes around and says, hey, tell me something good. And it makes you stop and think for a minute, like, oh, it's not just how are you? And then you have your canned response. And you want people to really know that you want to connect with them. And why is it important to ask those questions? Or you say, tell me one thing that makes you happy here at work. What is one thing that makes you satisfied? Or what's one thing that makes you feel like you're a part of something here at your organization, whatever that is. Those are the questions, because those are the ones that go beyond the surface greeting of hello, how are you?
Right.
Because hello, how are you is just a greeting anymore. It's not even like anybody cares. I mean, sometimes people will care, but for the most part, they don't. So it's get to those other questions and focus on them, and really help that individual know about belonging.
If I could interject just for 1 second on that. So when my best friend, when he came back from Afghanistan, he was in Afghanistan for 6 months. When he came back after a little while, we started, talking about, funny, he mentioned as things that he missed being in Afghanistan. And, up until that point, it was, oh, I'm so glad to be back stateside. Oh, it was go, 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 and then wait for a long time, or, laying down on a rock, and he said one thing he's going to miss, and his job was very specific, and he had to go meet with different elders from different tribes. And when he was talking about the culture they had, and he said, when they said, Kef halak, when they said, hello, how are you? It wasn't, oh, hey, how are you? It was, how are you? How is your being? How is your family? How is, how is everything about you? And the answers were never fine, great. It was, it was a little bit more involved, but that's with that culture. That, if that's the culture, great. I think that aspect of the culture is phenomenal. But you're right. So I always you should never ask a question that you really don't know the answer, or you don't want the answer. And do you really want the answer to, how are you? Are you fine? How are you? Or how are you feeling? Do you really want that answer? Or is there something more specific you want driven from that answer? And I think that's what you were getting on, was not just because if you get first of all, you can, risk you don't know what's going on in their life, and maybe they start divulging, and then this is now spiraled out. And,
right.
But if you want to have a game plan in your mind of, this communication. Okay, I want to get to this point. Well, there are specific things I should ask and that I do want to know the answers to, so I can continue on with this communication. So I think I nailed it perfectly. Knowing those specific, trying to find out what those specific questions are that you want to know about the individual.
Exactly. And I'm not suggesting that you never ask the person how they feel. I'm
Mhm.
just saying you don't have to start off there. So what we're trying to
Right.
do is create this bridge back. We want to focus more on the fact that they feel a part of something, and they feel that they are that this vision of what they have is even bigger and greater than they are. And there's a belonging, and that's where you begin. It begins with belonging, because the individual first commits to the group and commits to it, and a certain portion of their identity becomes part of the group identity. And value then is the second element. So how do you create value? Well, value and belonging will kind of work together. Actually, all three of the elements work together. But value and belonging can kind of ping pong back and forth. And what happens with value is that the person knows that what they do matters, that they
Right.
do meaningful work, and that they're being celebrated as an individual who is contributing to something that makes a difference. So when my value is attached to something that's bigger or greater than me,
Hmm.
then I have this belonging, and now I know where my place is. And so I'm able to do that. So one of the things to look at for value is to also consider, well, what are the tangible benefits that the individual might receive, or what were the changes in benefits that you made as a result of the transition, and how will you restore those benefits? Because sometimes those benefits create that value, even though it's extrinsic, that the dollars that you make, the healthcare or the 401k or whatever you have,
The
it's
promotion.
still
Yeah.
yeah, it's still important to the individual. So you can't just discard it. So you have to think about that a little bit. You also have to create in value. You have to create debriefing. So you really want to find out what was the person experiencing when they were away, when they were no longer connected, when they were just connected electronically. We had individuals complete a survey who said that they enjoyed the freedoms and the opportunities to work from home, but it wasn't for them on a long-term basis. So you see, this remote working isn't for everyone. So it also reminds the organization to make sure that you're not devaluing people by putting them into a remote location if they don't want to be remote. Now, if your organization changes that this particular function no longer has to be in the physical headquarter location and it needs to be remote, then you may have to consider rehiring, you may have to consider retooling. But regardless of whether they're a remote worker or not, they still need to have this sense of belonging, value, and mutual commitment. And without that interaction, you're going to lose them. The good news with technology, like today, we're not only taping this so that people can hear our voices electronically, but people can also watch this and see this and actually connect not only to the voices, but to the actions and to the body language that we have, any of the gestures that we're making. And it actually enhances the whole communication, and it enhances the value. So we really have to focus on what the person is doing and continue to remember how to connect it, not only to others within the organization, but to the end product, the desired outcome that you want to have for the organization, which might work with how you provide your product or service for the consumer.
A lot of that,
That's
absolutely. A lot of that could be, advice that could be taken now from leaders. I mean, we've seen on, different talk shows, news, the Zoom happy hour, the 5 o'clock or whatever Zoom happy hour. And I mean, I know a good handful of people who have been on Zoom happy hours, and that's great because, okay, yeah, it has, this connection. I relate that to uh, everyone, people coming back to the office and saying, all right, guys, we're back together. Let's all go out for a dinner, or I'm catering, or let's do, and then that's it. And I'm seeing a lot of the Zoom happy hours, and I'm not hearing, and I'm hoping that they're occurring more than than me not hearing them, but the connections with the connections the leaders are having with their employees, with the different colleagues on their team. We're in this together. You guys are doing a great job, but let's remember what that value is. Let's remember that it is bigger than just the one person. And what I love about that is when somebody has a value and someone's connecting their value to something that's not just them, that's bigger than them, then they understand to accomplish this, which I it's valuable to me and I want to accomplish. I can't do it on my own. I have to seek others.
Right.
And it takes away, maybe even the mindset or the thought of, oh, I have to go talk to this one. I had this person. I need to go communicate with this person. It's okay. Well, if this just needs to get done, this is just a natural process now. It's bigger than me. It's going to take more than me. So now of course I would have to. I love that idea. The of course, mom. Well, yeah, of course I have to go talk to someone else. That would
Yeah.
make sense rather than having to be told. So yeah, it's a good approach, to bringing people together.
Yeah. And just like value works with belonging, value now actually works with mutual commitment. So
Mhm.
in the mutual commitment, what really happens in cohesion is when the leadership actually creates attention or invests in the individual employee to their dreams and aspirations and where they want to go, and align that with the organization. So if you're hiring people who want to continue to develop and work in a particular area of your expertise of the company, then you should be able to align their development then with the organizational outcome. If
Right.
in an organization, when you do like an onboarding, or if you basically, all the leader does is says, these are the numbers you need to get. You need to get these numbers, you need to do this time, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. You spend all your time focusing on the task and not on the people aspect of it. So the mutual commitment is making sure that you mutually understand what the individual needs and wants, and then align that to what you want as your desired outcomes. And it's like a yin and yang, and it's not really balance. I want to make sure I'm really clear on this. I know visually it's hard for people to see this who are listening, but just imagine balancing is like having two forms of clay, two clay balls in each hand. And then you go balance. Oh, okay, balance. So what happens with balance? Well, with balance, your hands go up and down. Your eyes look to one, looks to the other. All of a sudden, it's like one or the other. What really happens in mutual commitment, it's called integration, and you put the two balls of clay together and you actually fold together. Then what happens? You have a single focus. What is everybody doing? You can then look at the one spot. You can look into where the two balls of clay have come together, and you can see it. And the two balls of clay, generally you can still see outlines with where they are, so they still have a definition, but they become integrated. And integration is so much more powerful than just considering the term balancing. And why I say that is because language creates the environment. And if what you want is for people to understand that they have a work-life integration, not a work-life balance, then they can.
Do you see I went to go write that down right now? I'm going to remember that.
Yes, it's a work-life integration, because it's then their priorities. They're able to plan and to prioritize what they're actually doing, understanding that it's an integration. And when an organization can allow for the mom to and the dad to not miss their children when they're doing athletics, or whenever they're doing art, or they're doing some sort of activity where it would be good to have the parental supervision to be a part of it, to be integrated with it, and to create work schedules that allow people to have that integration of their life. Then they don't have to choose. When I was first in business, one of my leaders was basically like, you have to leave what you're doing. You have to leave your family life on the door, so that when you come into the office at 7:30, 8, 9, 10, whenever your time is, you're dedicated to the employer, and I don't care what happened. I don't care that you had an argument before you came in. Now, I'm suggesting that leadership does not have to delve into it, but I think it's important to be more realistic that it's not like that. The individual does not have a switch that they turn off and on and says, okay, work is on, life is off. It has to integrate between it. There has to be an opportunity for individuals to understand the total value that they want to have for the organization, the commitment level that creates the value. And the belonging is the mechanism that holds people together because we want to belong, but value and commitment create the performance. And I think the other thing that I would also say too, we started to talk a little bit about this earlier in the interview, but we didn't get there. And that is, for leadership, it's really about the pursuit of performance, not perfection.
Right.
And can we pursue the performance of the individual and not worry about it being perfect? Because the humanness of us is messy.
Right. I like that. I like that, the pursuit of so well, there's so many things I want to that you said that I want to hit on. First of all, the work-life balance swap, or kind of, so I've had this conversation recently with a handful of people. Work-life balance, it was a good buzzword. We started seeing that about early 10 years ago, maybe like 6 7 years ago, and then but it's been taken to the extreme on both sides, where employees will use it. A lot of times employees will use it saying work-life balance, but really have a focus on the, I'm not having the life balance, so I need to have more, more freedom from work. And then a lot of business leadership uses it, and because it's not clearly defined, and they say, well, you need to have work-life balance. You need to be able to work, fulfill all your functions at work, but also, have the lifetime, away from the work. But with this idea of integration, that's just how life is, and that's how our culture and our society is going, right? I mean, where your life is, well, it's leadership being all encompassing too, right? You can't say, here's my life leadership and here's my work leadership. No, it's all together. I love this idea of integration, because that's really what it is when you have your work and your life integrated together. Then you're able to see. I can't know. All I'm going to do is repeat exactly what you said, because that was, I hadn't heard it. That cleared so many things up. That really did. Thank you for
Yeah.
that.
Well, oh, you're welcome to do that. And same thing with cohesion. It's a combination. It's an integration of the three elements. So we define the element individually, just like
Right.
you define work, you define life, but you integrate them. So they actually all will work together, like in a little nucleus inside of a shell. And so the cohesion culture operates in a way to hold the organization together. So those opportunities to have your belonging, value, and commitment. So when you look at the model, you'd be able to say that's your outer shell is that, and then the inside pieces are your culture, your beliefs, your attitudes and behaviors, and how they work. And then you support them through either what I call communicating or relating, and learning and communicating. So kind of looking at those individual things that you do, the tactical items that you actually do to make it work. So you have a combination between, there are tactical things that I need to do, and then there's philosophical things I need to have in place. So you just really are looking at them and trying to make really good decisions on how each of them play together. And another comment regarding this integration versus balancing is this: if it's important, like in research, the one thing I learned was bias. And it was, you disclose your bias in research. It's called reflectivity. And when you disclose your bias, the reader or the individual looking at research understands possibly where you were writing from.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean then that it changes the interpretation. It just gives the reader more insight into what you were actually saying. And what happens
It
when
puts
you
things in
ask,
context.
it does, into context. And so what happens when you ask people to hide their feelings? When you ask them, what you want is for an individual to manage their feelings, manage their emotions. It's why it's called emotional intelligence. And there's
Mm-hmm.
a whole bunch of conversation around that, which we don't have enough time for.
Right.
As
That's a
I
whole
know we're getting
podcast series.
we're getting to the close of our time, because each of us have other commitments from this. But the point is, in looking at what we're doing, and how it comes together, you don't hide your feelings. I think that you look at ways in which your feelings can exist, but they don't manage you.
Right.
You manage your feelings and emotions. And my mother had a lot of influence on me, and that's another whole topic altogether. But one of the things that she would tell me is that character is defined by choices, not circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
So who you show up to be each and every day is going to be based on the choices that you make, not on the circumstances you find yourself in. So we were from a very poor family. Rarely, I mean, we had rice 4 times a week for dinner.
Oh yeah.
So it was so if we would have been defined simply by the circumstances that we were in a situation where the economics were not up to par as they would be to someone else, then we would give away our opportunity for growth and development. There is no way that I would have ever achieved what I have achieved in my life had I have lived out the circumstances that I was not good enough because I didn't make enough money, or I didn't have this, or I didn't have that. Instead, you focused on what you have, and you focused on where you wanted to go, and you made choices based on that. And then again, balancing it with that, part of the choices that you make, not circumstances, you overlay that transformative concept. And Mom used to say, she used to say, be careful how you then carry that out, because you're going to be dealing with people in that process, and you don't want to run over people to get what you want. So again, it's integrating all of these thoughts and ideas together, and giving yourself permission to think them through. I don't think that leaders think enough sometimes. They are too quick to try to come to the answer. They also think they're the only ones that can come up with the answer, or they put all the pressure on themselves to say, I have to have the answer. And the reality is, they don't have to have the answer. They have to have the process to get the answer, which is why I'm going to kind of close up this entire section with you on one of my mantras. And that is, you don't have to know everything. You just need to be teachable.
I love it. I love it. I was going to quote that earlier, but then I forgot about it. I was like, I want to make sure. I was flipping through the book because I know where you said it. I was like, all right, come on, where is that? So I'm really glad that you added that in there. Thank you so much, Dr. Hall. Can you do me one quick favor? And it works out that you have your notes there. Can you just kind of go through those steps or those things that the business owners or business leaders, they need to focus on when, entering back into the office?
Great. So we'll start with the fact that your overall opportunity is to motivate, influence, and enable others to achieve success. And we're going to do it through cohesion. We're going to do it through a sense of belonging, value, and mutual commitment. And so the activities that you do in belonging are those that help the person believe that they are a part of something special, that the vision that you have provided to them includes them and moves them to a place that they can aspire to. Not just inspiring them through motivation, but aspiring them to another place. Begin asking questions that are more tailored to the things that they're doing, and to the habits and to the activities of the individual when you first bring them. I know it probably goes in the face of relationship, because you don't want to focus on how they're feeling so much in this sense of belonging, but what have they been doing, and then relate to them. So it's a little bit of a twist in what we mentioned before in doing that. We want to make sure that we do have celebrations, that we welcome individuals back with this belonging, create connections. In value, we want to take a look at, well, what do we do today that may be different than what we did, but still, how does it connect to the overall job that I'm doing? And to make sure that my job is meaningful and that it actually has value, not only to myself, but to the others I work with and to the end product that I'm delivering, whether it be a product or a service. And consider things like in value, words of affirmation. How will you communicate to the individual that things are great, or that they are great? And then lastly, in the mutual commitment, just remember to focus on the development of the individual. Focus on what's important to them and align what's important to them to the organization. And when all of these particular things come together, you will then have an opportunity for a cohesion culture. You will also have an opportunity to bridge the gap of what you did then and what you are doing here, because you're basing it on a model. And again, it's going to be unique for your organization. And so if in gut checking all of this, if you want to gut check yourself to say, okay, now I put these things in place, Dr. Troy, did I do it well? I suggest you look for greetings, listen for laughter, and participate in fist bumps. And when you have those items all coming together, you have a good way of interpreting how things are going. It's not just on one or another. And in greetings, are people actually connecting and talking to each other, or are they just coming and saying hello and going into their chair? And laughter is the sound of a cohesive culture. It means people are getting along, they're releasing tension, and that laughter is always good-hearted humor. Never the humor that actually downgrades or degrades somebody. It's always a really good space. That laughter is humor. And then the fist bumps, because today we're social distancing, so we want to do the fist bump. It's any compliment or any type of acknowledgement that you give an individual, and how do you make that connection, and how do you make that connection physical, even when it's used through technology.
Absolutely. Wow. Dr. Hall, thank you so very much. This has been a fantastic episode. I already know it has. I don't need to look at the comments or the likes. I know I'm going to go in there and like it a bunch myself. And I've absolutely loved this time. I greatly appreciate it. Guys, it is Cohesion Culture. Oh, let's get it up over here. Cohesion Culture. There you go. Do you have a book there too? Oh, look at that. Look at that. Retain Your Top Talent. It can be found on Amazon.com. It can be found on Kindle. I'll have the links right underneath. Is there anything else? Where can they find you, or where can they get more information for you?
So if they want to find out more about me, they can connect with me on multiple social media platforms at Dr. Troy Hall. That's Dr. Troy Hall, or on the website, which is drtroyhall.com.
Dr. Troy Hall, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
I hope you great success with this book. It's a fantastic book. What I like about it is it's a plain word read. Like, it doesn't pontificate on 8-syllable words. It gets right to the point, and it's reminiscent of like Simon Sinek, like how he just gets right to the point, and this is what it is, So I greatly appreciate that. Check out the book, read the book. It's a great book, everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Hall.
Thank you.